بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We begin today the second lesson based upon this book, Kitab al-Usul al-Iman. And in the first lesson that we had a few weeks back, we looked at some of the proofs, some of the evidences, some of the proofs for the 6 pillars of Iman, or the 6 foundations of Iman, which is belief in Allah, and belief in the angels, and belief in the books, and belief in the messengers, and belief in the last day, and belief in al-Qadr, the good of it and the bad of it. So today we begin a series of lessons that we'll discuss with the first pillar of Iman, which is al-Imanu billah, which is belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this will take up a fair portion of the book to deal with the subject. And so we begin on page 9 of this printed edition of this book, and the first chapter, al-Bab al-Awwal, al-Imanu billah, the first chapter concerning faith in Allah. So the authors of the book, they begin by saying that indeed, having faith in Allah, the Mighty and Majestic, it is the greatest of the foundations of Iman, the greatest of the pillars of Iman. And it is the greatest of them in importance, and the highest of them in rank, or the highest of them in degree. Rather, the authors say, it is the most foundational principle of Iman itself, and it is the very basis or the foundation of the building of Iman, or the construction of Iman. So belief in Allah, if you like, is the foundation of the building, and it is something upon which the whole of Iman actually rests upon. And all of the other usul, all of the other foundations, they branch off from this foundation. So in other words, from the foundation of the belief in Allah, all of the other usul, all of the other foundations, they branch off from it. So the belief in Allah, and the belief in the angels, the belief in the messengers, the belief in the books, and so on and so forth, all of them branch off from the belief in Allah, which is the basis, the foundation, and the most important of them all. So what exactly is this Iman in Allah? What is this foundation? What is this basis? And what is it? How do we understand it? And the answer to that is that our belief in Allah is summarized in the following. That we believe in Allah, that Allah is unique. He is unique. He is alone. He is singled out in rububiyyah and uluhiyyah and asma wa sifat. Inshallah, we will explain each of these terms in a bit more detail. So in a nutshell, to believe in Allah means, after we believe in His existence, to believe in His rububiyyah and in His uluhiyyah and in His asma wa sifat, and that He is unique and singled out in all of that. And rububiyyah means that Allah is the creator of everything and the Lord of everything. And uluhiyyah means that He alone has the right to be worshipped. And asma wa sifat means that He has names and He has attributes which signify His perfection. And so all of these, inshallah ta'ala, we will speak of them. So these 3 foundations and these 3 principles, the Tawheed of rububiyyah, the Tawheed of uluhiyyah, and the Tawheed of asma wa sifat, then belief in Allah is built upon them. In fact, the whole of the deen of Islam, why do we call it Tawheed? Why do we use the word Tawheed? And why do we refer to Islam as Tawheed? This is because that Islam is built upon the belief that Allah is unique and alone in His mulk, meaning that He alone possesses everything. It is His creation, it is His kingdom. And that He is alone and unique and single in His actions. So in His actions of creating and giving life and taking life and providing and sustaining and so on and so forth, Allah is alone in those actions. And likewise, in His names and His attributes, He is alone. And then we see that after we've singled out Allah and we've made Allah unique in all of these affairs, then we negate from Him that He has any likeness, or that He has any partner, or that He has any rival or competitor, or that He has any intercessor. Right? We find that in the Quran, all of these things are negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just to go through some of the verses, very briefly, so far we've established that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unique in owning the creation, He's unique and in regulating the creation, He's unique in the right to be worshipped alone, and He is unique in His names and attributes. Once we've established this, we will find in the Quran that Allah negates many words and many terms from Himself. As an example, Allah says, Allah negates from Himself some of these verses we are very familiar with. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Here Allah has negated from Himself a mithal. A mithal means something which is exact, an exact likeness, or an exact replica. So there is no mithal for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no mithal for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing which is like Him. So mithal is negated. And what we mean by mithal is like if you, something which is an exact likeness, like you have one car, and then there's another car, exactly the same model, exactly the same make, exactly the same specification. One is a mithal of the other. So there is no mithal for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nothing that is a likeness of Him, or a likeness to Him. So Allah has negated that in the Quran. So this is first negation. There's no mithal for Allah. Another negation, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. We all know this verse in Surah Ikhlas. Allah has negated from Himself a kufu. And this means having, it's a similar word, but it means an equal. Is there an equal to Allah? There is no equal to Allah. Allah has negated that He has an equal. Also Allah has negated from Himself any nid. This is the third one, nid. What does nid mean? Nid means a rival, if you like, a rival, or a competitor, a rival. So Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. That do not make for Allah any rivals whilst you know. So Allah has negated from Himself a nid. This is the third negation. The fourth thing Allah has negated from Himself is a sami. Sami. Sami, what this word means in English, the best word that we can use is a namesake. And what this means is that there is no one besides Allah who deserves to be given the name or to be called by a name that Allah has for Himself. And there is no one who possesses any qualities or anything on account of which he now deserves to be given a name which belongs to Allah. There is no namesake for Allah. This is what it means. Allah does not have any namesake. This is the word Sami. So Allah has negated from Himself mithal and kufu and nid and Sami. Then on top of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has negated 4 levels that might exist in which someone might falsely ascribe to Allah any partner. Allah has negated 4 levels of, if you like, shirk, or 4 levels of the roots of shirk. The roots of shirk. In this verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, and pay attention to this verse very carefully, because Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he uses this verse as a proof to show that in the Quran, Allah has cut off every single route of shirk, every single avenue or every single route that leads to somebody worshipping other than Allah, that Allah has already cut all of that off in the Quran. And in this verse Allah says, قُلِ ادْعُوا الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. So Allah says, say, O Muhammad, to the people, call upon those whom you claim besides Allah. Meaning claim upon those whom you call upon and whom you worship and whom you think or claim as gods besides Allah. Call upon them. Then Allah says, لا يملكون مثقال ذرة في السماوات ولا في الأرض. This is the first level now. Allah has said that they do not own or possess not even an atom, the weight of an atom, in the heavens nor the earth. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has negated from anyone besides Him that they own anything. This is a complete negation that anybody owns anything. Nobody owns anything, rather Allah is the owner of everything. So here Allah has negated mulk. There is no one who has mulk, meaning ownership of anyone besides Allah. So even us, for example, we own houses, we own cars, we own... This ownership is only temporary ownership. It is not an absolute ownership. Absolute ownership belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything we possess of wealth and children and wives and husbands and whatever else, of the possessions that we hold, which are in our houses, the money, the wealth, the clothing, the cars, all of this is temporary. Nobody owns it. Nobody owns anything. Nobody owns, for example, all of the metal which exists upon this earth, through which construction is made. Nobody owns that. You might have multi-billion dollar companies who own metal, who mine metal, who sell metal, who store metal, but do they own it? They don't own it. They don't have absolute ownership. They hold it temporarily and use it for a purpose, but they do not own it absolutely. So there is no such thing as complete and absolute ownership for anyone besides Allah. This is why in this verse Allah has said, Allah has negated from those who are worshipped besides Allah that they own anything. لا يملكون مثقال ذرة في السماوات ولا في الأرض. So no one owns even an atom. Nobody owns an atom. No person on this earth owns even an atom of anything. Rather, so this proves that Allah is the owner of every single thing. So the first point then here, first level in this verse that has been negated, is that nobody owns anything, and mulk belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Allah moves on to the next level, and He says, وَمَا لَهُمْ فِيهِمَا مِنْ شِرْكٍ. And that none of them have any share in that, in the heavens and the earth. So now Allah has negated the next level, because if we look at a situation, maybe there might be a situation where, let's say a man owns a company and he is the sole owner. There's nobody else. There's nobody else who owns anything with him, so he's the sole owner. But we've already established in this verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only owner. So let's say there is a man now, and he owns a company. It is possible that he might have a sharik. He might have a partner. He has a partner in the company to help him run the company. Right? With respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we've already established that no one owns anything besides Allah. But is it possible that Allah has a sharik, meaning that He has someone who shares with Him, who shares ownership with Him? Because even though Allah has negated mulk and ownership, it may be possible that someone owns something alongside Allah, in the sense that He is a sharik, that He is a partner. And so therefore Allah also negated this from Himself, that He has no sharik, He has no partner. There is no one who shares with Him in the ownership of anything. There's no joint ownership. Rather, Allah alone, He owns everything. So this second level now is negated. Second level now is totally negated. Because remember, these arguments are the arguments that the people of shirk may use to justify worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is systematically destroying and negating each of these arguments. So the first one is that no angel, no jinn, no human, no one owns anything, not even an atom. So there goes that justification for worshipping other than Allah. Further, no one has any share with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No angel shares anything with Allah. No jinn shares anything with Allah. No human shares anything with Allah. No prophet shares anything with Allah. So this now is the second level of a sharik being negated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah continues, وَمَا لَهُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ ظَهِيرٍ. And neither does Allah have from amongst them any dhahir. And dhahir means anyone who is an aider, who assists or who gives support. Right? So, we see that Allah has negated mulk. No one owns anything besides Him. Allah has negated a sharik, a partner. But Allah has also negated an aider and a supporter. So it might be the case, for example, amongst the creation, that a person, he owns his own company, or maybe he owns his own house, and there is no partner with him, or partner, he doesn't have any partner who shares, who's got a 50 share or whatever, but he may have someone who supports him and aids him voluntarily. So he helps him to run his company, or he helps him to run his estate, or he helps him to run his house. So now he has someone to aid him. Allah has now negated that level as well. So there's no one who aids Allah. The angels do not aid Allah in the sense that Allah needs their aid to run the creation. Allah does not need the aid of the jinn. Allah does not need the aid of men. There is nothing besides Him whose aid Allah is in need of to run His creation. So Allah has negated now any dhahir. This is the third level. He's negated mulk, He's negated a sharik, and He's negated a dhahir. So this now destroys another potential argument of the people of shirk. Well, the angels, they aid and support Allah in running His creation. So therefore, they must have some position and some rank. So therefore, we worship them. Or the jinn, they have some role in the creation. Therefore, we worship them. Or the prophets, even they may claim. Or even like we find amongst the Sufis, that there are certain key figureheads from the greatest of the walis of Allah who may be in charge of such and such, and another one is in charge of such and such. And so therefore, because they aid and support Allah in running the creation, therefore we can now worship them. And therefore we can now turn to them, or we can make offerings to them, and so on and so forth. So even this level, Allah has negated and denied this root of shirk. No dhahir. And then the fourth level, Allah says, وَلَا تَنْفَعُ الشَّفَاعَةُ عِنْدَهُ إِلَّا لِمَنْ أَذِنَ لَهُ. So He said that intercession will not benefit anyone in the presence of Allah except the one to whom He has given His permission. This now brings us to the fourth level and the fourth root and the fourth argument of the people of shirk, which is that after you have rejected and refuted that Allah has anyone that there is anyone who owns anything besides Allah, who has mulk besides Allah, and after you have refuted and rejected that there is anyone who is a sharik with Allah in His mulk, who shares with Allah in His mulk, and after you have rejected and refuted that there is any dhahir, any aid and supporter for Allah in His mulk, then there is nothing left for these people except to argue that, well, these people, they intercede on our behalf with Allah. That, we don't believe they own anything with Allah. We don't believe that they have a share with Allah, that they are sharik with Allah. We don't believe that they are a dhahir with Allah, that they aid and support Allah in His creation. We don't believe any of that. But we simply want their intercession. We simply want their intercession. This is the fourth root and the fourth level of shirk. So in this one verse, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions in his book Madarij al-Salikin, in this one verse Allah has demolished and destroyed all of the avenues and all of the roots and all of the arguments to shirk. From all of the people of all of the religions, no matter who they are, what religion they're from, whether they claim attachment to Islam, whether they are Christians, whether they are Jews, whether they are, the Hindus or whatever, all of the usul of shirk have been negated in this verse. So in short then, basically what we are saying here in this introduction is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that to have Iman in Allah means to make Allah unique and to make Him alone and to single Him out with three things. That Allah is the sole creator and the owner and the provider of the universe. This is rububiyyah. Number two, that Allah alone has the right to be worshipped with all of the forms and types of worship. This is uluhiyyah. And thirdly, that Allah is described with names and attributes which are the most beautiful names and the most lofty attributes. These three things together is Iman in Allah and belief in Allah. But then in addition to this, we have to deny and negate certain things from the creation. So Allah does not have any mithal in the creation. Allah does not have any nid, rival. Allah does not have any kufu, equal. Allah does not have any sami, a namesake. And likewise, Allah does not have anyone who owns anything in the creation, or who shares in the ownership with Allah, or who aids and supports Allah, or who is a shafi'. So remember there's 8 things. Remember all these 8 things. Remember these. So when you explain Iman in Allah to somebody, it could be a Jew or a Christian or a Buddhist or even to a Muslim you want to teach, remember these 4 things. That when you explain Iman in Allah, you explain these 3 foundations, Tawheed, Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah, Asma wa Sifat, and in addition to that, we negate, these 8 things are negated. And this will give you, a good, concise explanation of what it means to have Iman in Allah, to have belief in Allah. Okay, now we said we're going to discuss each of these 3 aspects of Tawheed, or these 3 aspects of Iman in Allah. Then the first of them, Al-Qism Al-Awwal. So the authors, they say, Al-Qism Al-Awwal, the first type is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. The Tawheed of Rububiyyah. What does this mean? This means that we believe in our hearts, we affirm and we believe and we establish in our hearts that Allah the Most High is the Rabb. The Rabb. The Rabb meaning the Lord, and we will explain this in a bit more detail. Of every single thing, He is its owner, He is its creator, He is its provider and sustainer, He is the one who gives life, He is the one who takes life, He is the one who provides benefit, He is the one who causes harm, He is the one who alone, He answers the supplication of anyone who is distressed and is in a calamity. He calls upon that. When that person calls upon Allah, Allah will answer him. Allah is alone in answering that person. Doesn't matter who he is. It could be a non-Muslim. Even if he's a non-Muslim. Or whether he's a Muslim, it makes no difference. Allah responds to everybody. Anyone who is in distress, be he a Muslim or a non-Muslim, then Allah will answer him. So even an atheist who is, for example, he's stranded somewhere in the middle of nowhere and whatever, and he's going to die and he calls upon Allah, even Allah responds to the atheist. In terms of responding to the one who is distressed, he's in a calamity and he calls up to Allah, Allah will answer him. Because Allah, this is from His rububiyyah. Because He is the creator and the provider and the sustainer of every single thing. The Muslim, the non-Muslim, the kafir, the mushrik, the atheist, the Jew, the Christian, the Buddhist, the jinn, it makes no difference. Allah is the Rabb of everyone and everything. And so all of these descriptions that we've given, all of this is from Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. That Allah is the owner, the creator, the provider, the sustainer. He gives life, He takes life, He brings about benefit, He brings about harm. He alone answers the call of anybody who is distressed and in a calamity. And all of the affairs, every single affair is in Allah's hand, is in Allah's control. All of goodness is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything refers back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no one besides Him, neither an angel, nor a jinn, nor a prophet, nor a righteous person to whom anything of the affairs go back to. So now when we understand this belief in our rububiyyah, we have to contrast this with the beliefs of many other people. To give an example, you have, I mentioned earlier, that some people believe that the angels are in charge of some of the affairs of the universe. right? That angels can respond of their own accord, or that there are jinn, demons who, have some control over affairs of evil, for example, or whatever. This is not the case. We don't believe any of this, and we don't. Well, this opposes Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, as we've stated, absolutely and categorically, without any exception, that Allah is in absolute, complete, total, utter control of His creation. However, He may give tasks to, for example, the angels, but this doesn't mean that the angels are in independent control or whatever. Rather, Allah, this is just the way that Allah has put them within the creation and give them tasks and duties. And so they perform the duties that they have been commanded. They never disobey. Allah is ultimately in control. So this is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, one of the foundations of our Iman in Allah, our belief in Allah. The second one is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, which is Allah's unique right to be worshipped alone. That we worship Allah alone. What this means is that we single out Allah, that we make Him unique, and we direct only to Him all of the various forms and types of worship, such as al-Mahabba, which is love, and al-Khushu', which is this humility and awe, and al-Ruku', when we bow down in the prayer, we don't bow to anybody else, and as-Sujud, when we prostrate, we don't prostrate to anybody else, and al-Dhabh, when we sacrifice an animal, we sacrifice it in the name of Allah, intending veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not any dead person in a grave, not any angel, tree, jinn, stone, tree, whatever. We venerate only Allah and mention only His name when we sacrifice. And likewise another, which is to make an oath, that when we make an oath, only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are just some examples of ibadah, of worship. And inshallah ta'ala we will look in more detail in a future lesson or with respect to ibadah in a bit more detail. But in short, ibadah, Tawheedul ibadah means that we direct only these forms of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. This is the second aspect of our belief in Allah, al-Imanu billah. The third aspect is to single out Allah, or what we call Tawheedul asma'i was sifat, which is to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His names and attributes. So this means that whatever Allah has described Himself with of names and attributes, which is found in the Quran and which is found in the Sunnah, that we describe Allah with that. And that whatever shortcomings or faults or defects, that we negate all of them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything which is a defect, which is a fault, which is a shortcoming, we negate it from Allah. And whatever names and attributes Allah has mentioned for Himself, or the Messenger has mentioned, then we affirm them for Allah. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we affirm that Allah is Alim, because Allah has said He is Alim, meaning the all-knowing. And Allah is Ala kulli shay'in qadir. He is Qadir. Qadir meaning all-powerful. Likewise, Allah is Al-Hayy, the ever-living, Al-Qayyum, the self-sustaining, who sustains everything else. And we believe, الَّذِي لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ, that Allah is one who is not overtaken by any sleep or slumber or tiredness. These are descriptions which have come in the Quran. And also we believe that Allah, He has a mashi'ah, He has a will. Whenever He wills anything, it will occur. And that Allah has al-hikmah, that in everything Allah does, there is perfect wisdom. So wisdom is an attribute of His. And likewise, Allah is Sami', all-hearing, Basir, all-seeing, Ra'ufun, who is compassionate, merciful, Rahim, merciful. So all of these are names. And likewise, descriptions. Ala al-arshi istawa. Allah has ascended above the throne. This is a description of Allah. We affirm that for Allah as well. And that He is Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, As-Salam, Al-Mu'min. These are more names of Allah. Al-Muhaymin, Al-Aziz, Al-Jabbar, Al-Mutakabbir. All of these are names for Allah. So we believe all of these names that Allah has mentioned, and likewise all the attributes that Allah has mentioned, having knowledge, having wisdom, becoming angry, becoming pleased, loving His servants. These are things which are mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So we affirm all of them in Allah, and this is from Iman in Allah. It is from Iman in Allah, and it is the third foundation of having Iman in Allah, that we believe in, these names and these attributes. So the evidences for all of these are very, very many in the Quran and in the Sunnah. The whole Quran actually is Tawheed. As Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah mentions in his book Madarij al-Salikin, that every single verse in the Quran, the whole Quran from beginning to end, is about Tawheed, is about singling Allah out in either of these three ways, in His Rububiyyah, or in His Uluhiyyah, in His right to be worshipped, or in His names and attributes. The first surah in the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha, we find that it begins with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise be to Allah, the Lord, the Rabb of all the world. So here is Rububiyyah. This is Allah being singled out as being the Rabb of everything. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Three names: Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and Malik or Malik. And likewise, three attributes, or two attributes: Rahmah. Allah is described with mercy, and Allah is described with mulk. So now we have names and attributes. And then Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'een. You alone do we worship. You alone do we worship. And from you alone do we seek aid. This is Tawheed of Ibadah, Tawheed of worship. In the very first surah in the Quran, in the first 4 verses in the Quran, we find the 3 types of Tawheed mentioned in the very beginning of the Quran. Right at the very end of the Quran, we see Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. Say, I seek refuge in the Lord, bi rabbin nas, of mankind. Ilahin nas. The ilah, meaning the deity, the one who is worshipped of mankind. Straight away we see Tawheed al-Rububiyyah and Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. Now Allah alone is the Rabb, and Allah alone is the ilah, the one who has the right to be worshipped. And then we see again, and then we find that the name, also the name of Allah mentioned in the surah as well. The greatest verse in the Quran, Ayatul Kursi. You find in Ayatul Kursi Allah's names, Allah's attributes, the negation of imperfections from Allah, that sleep does not overtake Him, nor does slumber. He does not get tired or weary of preserving and guarding the heavens and the earth. All this is in Ayatul Kursi. And He is Allah, besides whom there is none worthy of worship besides Allah. This is Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. So we find the same thing in the greatest verse in the Quran. And then when you look at the Quran, we find that the whole of the Quran is either about Allah, or His names, or His attributes, or His right to be worshipped alone, or His creation, that He is the creator, that He provides, that He sustains, or it is about His prophets who came to call the people to Tawheed, or it is about the rewards for Tawheed and the punishment for its opposite. So the whole Quran, every single thing, every single verse is all connected and related to Tawheed in one form or in one way or another. We should understand that. And then the next issue that the Shaykh, or that we should also point out here, is that this understanding of Tawheed, where we've said that Tawheed is of 3 categories, then where does this come from? Where does this originate from? Is it something that someone has just made up in the 20th century, or the 19th, or the 18th, or the 17th? Where has it come from? The scholars of Islam, from the beginning, from the early times to this day of ours, have looked into the Quran and the Sunnah in detail. They have done a comprehensive, detailed study of all of the verses, all of the surahs. And from that detailed study, they have found that in the Quran, that the Tawheed that Allah has revealed, and which the messengers came with, that it can be categorized in this way. That Allah is alone in being the creator and the owner and the provider of the universe. That Allah is alone in His right to be worshipped alone. And that Allah is alone in His names and His attributes. And this is from a detailed study. And just to refute, just at this point, we don't want to go into detail here, but just to make some quick points and some indications to refute some people, because they claim that this understanding of Tawheed has come from Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab in the 17th century. Or it has come from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah in the 13th century, meaning the Christian era that we're talking about. So just to refute this claim, and again we don't have time to go into detail on this issue, maybe in another lesson, but rather we find that the early scholars of tafsir, like Imam al-Tabari, rahimahullah, he died in the year 310 Hijrah. When we look in his tafsir of the Quran, you find in many verses, in many commentaries of the verses, he actually mentions Allah's lordship, His uniqueness in His lordship, and His uniqueness in His right to be worshipped alone. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah and Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. And we find it many times in his tafsir. That's number one. Number two, the first person to categorize Tawheed in this manner was Ibn Battah. Ibn Battah is a scholar from the 4th century of Islam, meaning in the 300 and something Hijrah, in the 4th century of Islam. And he has a book, Al-Ibana, which is a 7-8 volume book as it is printed now. And in this book he mentions explicitly this understanding or this categorization of Tawheed. Then we find also the scholars like Ibn Abil Izz al-Hanafi in the 8th century Hijrah and the 13th century in the Christian era, that he mentions it he wrote a book in commentary of Al-Tahawi's Aqeedah, and in a book he mentions these categories of Tawheed. So the point being that this is just merely a false claim and a false allegation by certain people to try and attack and to try and belittle this Tawheed that the messengers came with, and this understanding which is the correct and true understanding of Tawheed that all of the messengers came with, all of the books were revealed with, and what the messengers called to. Okay, now, so this, what we've covered so far, was simply just an introduction regarding al-Imānu billah. In a nutshell, if someone was to ask you, what is al-Imānu billah? What is faith in Allah? What is your faith in Allah? This is how we explain it. We explain it with what we've mentioned so far in this lesson. That Iman in Allah, that our belief as Muslims. So if you're speaking to a non-Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, a Hindu, whatever, and they ask you, what is faith in Allah? How would you believe in God? How would you believe in Allah? Then you give this answer. You say that our belief in Allah is based upon 3 foundations. That we believe that Allah is unique and alone in His lordship, meaning that He alone provides, sustains, creates, gives life, takes life. So all of those actions that relate to the regulation of the universe and the creation of the universe, that Allah is unique and alone in that. This is the first pillar of our faith. The second pillar of our faith in Allah is that Allah alone has the right to be worshipped. He deserves to be worshipped alone. And no one besides Him has that right. So everything which is worship of prostrating, bowing, loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the muhabba, and fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and sacrificing, and so on and so forth, that only Allah has the right to be worshipped. This is from faith in Allah. And thirdly, whatever Allah has named Himself of names and attributes, that we affirm them from Allah, whilst negating all faults, shortcomings, deficiencies, blemishes, that we negate them from Allah. These 3 are our foundations of our belief in Allah. At the same time, we negate from Allah certain things. We negate that He has a mithal, any likeness. We negate from Allah that He has any kufu, an equal. We negate from Allah that He has a nid, which is a rival. And we negate from Him that He has a sami, any namesake. And likewise we negate from Him, or we negate from the creation 4 things. Right? So there's no one who owns anything in the universe. There's no one who shares in owning anything along with Allah in the universe. There's no one who aids, who is a dhahir with Allah in His universe. And there is no one who can intercede with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except with Allah's permission, because Allah owns ash-shafa'ah. Allah owns ash-shafa'ah. So no one can make intercession except with His permission and the one with whom He is pleased. So all of this then explains our Iman in Allah. And if you were to explain this to anybody, be he a Jew or a Christian or a red Indian in America who's worshipping his gods, this will explain Tawheed in a manner that will explain Tawheed and also demolish the roots of shirk that individual will be falling into. Right? And it doesn't matter which person, who he is, which religion, where he is, what he's upon, Buddhist, Jew, Hindu, Christian, fire worshipper, shaman, the shamanism, the Red Indian, whatever, it doesn't matter who they are, where they are. When you explain all of this in this manner, that will then demolish the roots of his shirk, just like it will establish the correct Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the one whom he ought to be worshipping. So inshallah, if we remember this, then this will give us a good foundation for understanding al-Imanu billah. So far, this has been just an introduction to the subject. Now we're going to go into each of these three, al-Rububiyyah, al-Uluhiyyah, al-Asma' sifat, in more detail. So this was just an introduction.